The film begins with a girl who is performing a ballet performance on a stage, but without realizing this girl has become a kidnapping target from a group of unknown people who have prepared in their respective positions. Right after the girl is in the house, the kidnapper group begins to carry out their actions. Although they were caught by the security, but they still managed to escape from there. Then, they took the girl to a house that had been prepared by the person who hired them to carry out the kidnapping. The person who hired them was named Lambert, but the task of the kidnappers was still not finished because they had to keep this girl for 24 hours until later, the ransom money from the girl's parents they received. They were also not allowed to tell their real names and backgrounds while still in this job. Then, to make sure they were not tracked by the police, Lambert confiscated their cell phones. Then, so that they could easily communicate, Lambert gave each of them initial names, namely Frank, Dean, Sammy, Peter, Joey, and Rickles. During these 24 hours, they had to look after the girl, and of course all their needs had been prepared by Lambert. When Lambert had left there, they gathered in the bar room while relaxing, but slowly the conversation got a little heated when Dean began to mention the background of Joey and the others. Of course, Dean's words were immediately replied to by Joey. He said that everything Dean mentioned was a mistake. Frank responded by issuing a $100 bill, and he asked Joey to guess his background. Then Joey guessed if Frank's background was a policeman. It was based on the way he stood, walked, the shoes he wore, and his Glock gun. Frank did not refute Joey's words. That means what Joey said earlier was all true. Seeing that, the others were also interested, and they told Joey to guess their respective backgrounds, of course with a bet of $100, just like Frank did. Starting from Peter, who only relies on muscles but does not use the brain, Joey guessed that when Peter was a child, he was bullied by his own father, until finally after Peter grew up, he returned his father's treatment. Continued to Sammy. Joey guessed that Sammy was the son of a rich man. She did this job just because she was bored. Finally, Dean. Joey said that Dean was not a professional person because of his strange nature and also a sociopath. Then Frank also guessed that Joey was a heavy addict. It was based on Joey's habit of always eating candy. Feeling that her disgrace was starting to be exposed, Joey diverted the conversation with the excuse that he wanted to check the condition of the girl they kidnapped. When Joey arrived at the room, the girl asked about what happened. Joey replied that now she is being kidnapped. But Joey asked the girl not to resist and comply with their wishes if they wanted to go home. Then, the girl asked Joey to take off her blindfold. Out of pity, Joey then complied with her request. Joey then explained that if later they had received the ransom money from his father, then he would be returned home. Joey also promised that while at home, no one would hurt her. But the girl named Abigail said if they had made a big mistake in kidnapping her because her parents did not care about her. Abigail also apologized if something happened to Joey later. Hearing this, Joey was confused and could only remain silent. Then Joey asked Frank again about Abigail's background, because Abigail's previous words implied that her father was a very cruel person. Then Frank said if Abigail just wanted to bluff by talking as if her parents were very cruel. Frank also felt suspicious of what Joey said. Frank decided to go to Abigail. Frank didn't know beforehand that Joey had removed Abigail's blindfold. Frank panicked and immediately pointed his gun at Abigail because he was afraid if Abigail saw his face.
Who the fuck is your father?
Christophe Lazar.
The fuck did you say?
After leaving Abigail's room, Frank intended to leave there immediately. Of course, it raises questions to Joey and other members. Frank explained that what they kidnapped was the daughter of Christophe Lazar. Dean said that Lazar's organization was just an urban legend or myth. Frank immediately denied it because, according to him, the Lazar organization was not a myth and they were real. An argument ensued between them about what they would do to Abigail, who they had kidnapped, until finally Frank suggested that they stay until the transaction was complete. But they had to be extra tight because the person they were going to face was a leader of the most feared criminals. They also share tasks according to their respective expertise. Then Joey, who was given the task of securing access in and out of the house, she accidentally met Rickles, who was on guard. Rickles said that he didn't trust Frank and the others, so he invited Joey to work together. And it was agreed by Joey. At the same time, Sammy was surprised because when she was in a room, suddenly Dean was also there. Immediately, Sammy kicked Dean out until Dean finally arrived at the kitchen of the house. A moment later, the kitchen door opened by itself. Curious, Dean tried to check. He only found a few mice. Then, when he was about to return to the kitchen, he was suddenly pulled by something. On the other hand, Sammy heard a scream from Dean. Out of curiosity, he looked for the source of the sound. Arriving at the kitchen, Sammy was again surprised by Dean, who was sitting on a chair, but when she approached him, it turned out that Dean's head had been separated from his body. Sammy's scream made Peter wake up and come straight to her. Sammy told Peter to tell the others about what happened to Dean, and when the others saw Dean's condition, they assumed that it was the work of Lazar's men named Valdez. Then Rickles told him that he had heard that there were 3 elite members of Lazar who were captured by the FBI a few years ago, although the 3 elite members who were arrested were hidden on the top floor of the hotel. But one day before their trial was held, for no apparent reason, the 3 elite members died, with the same conditions as Dean's condition now. Sammy, who heard Rickles' story at first, did not believe it, but Frank assured him because he had seen the incident several times. Then, they decided to check Abigail's condition in the room. Upon arriving at Abigail's room, they saw nothing strange.
She's fine.
For fear that something like Dean would happen to him, Rickles decided to leave the house.
Rickles.
It turned out that they had been trapped in the house.
Stand back.
Rickles rushed to get a gun where he was guarding before. It turned out that his weapon was gone. Meanwhile, Joey again went to see Abigail in the room. She wants to make sure whether anyone else entered Abigail's room besides her. Abigail then replied that previously Frank was the one who entered this room. Not only that, Abigail also said that Frank confessed to Abigail that he was a subordinate of his father named Valdez. Knowing this, Joey was immediately silent. A moment later, Rickles called to invite him to talk about something. Rickles told Joey that his gun had been stolen by someone. Joey also told Abigail's previous words. If in fact, Frank was Valdez. Because they felt something was wrong, they also planned to hit Frank. When he was about to leave, suddenly Rickles fell silent in his place. Joey, who saw it, immediately approached Rickles, but it turned out that Rickles was dead with a torn condition. Immediately, Joey became panicked and immediately looked for Frank's whereabouts. After meeting and telling everything, Frank was even confused by what Joey said. According to him, they were now being pitted by Abigail. Feeling that something was wrong, Frank then told Peter to kill Abigail immediately. But Joey did not remain silent, remembering that he had previously promised Abigail that no one would hurt her. The tension between them was back. What they didn't realize was that suddenly Abigail casually removed the handcuffs on her hands, and it turned out that the girl they had kidnapped was a vampire girl. Even though Frank managed to shoot her in the head, Abigail would not die that easily. Luckily, they still had time to lock Abigail in the room. Finally, now they know that all this time they have only been played by Abigail, who turned out to be Valdez. They were also surprised that the girl they kidnapped was a vampire. After knowing this fact, Frank invited them all to immediately kill Abigail. But Joey refused Frank's invitation because, according to her, if they killed Abigail, then they would lose the right to negotiate with Lazar. Even so, Frank still insisted on killing Abigail, even without Joey's help. Then Frank tells Peter to make a spear from a pool cue to stab Abigail, while Sammy takes garlic so that it can ward off Abigail, who is a vampire. But Joey did not want to participate because he thought it was useless. Considering that Abigail was a smart child, the proof was that they were successfully pitted by Abigail. And after they attacked, it turned out that Joey's prediction was correct. Frank, Peter, and Sammy failed to kill Abigail. She also turned out to be ineffective with garlic or crosses. Even Frank's leg was injured by his own weapon. In that desperation, Joey then suggested injecting Abigail with the anesthetic they used before when kidnapping Abigail. Feeling that there was no other choice, they all finally agreed to Joey's suggestion and began to split up to paralyze Abigail. While looking for Abigail's whereabouts, Sammy accidentally fell into a pond, which turned out to be filled with dozens of human corpses. On the other hand, Peter, who did not seem serious about finding Abigail, was visited by the vampire. Peter, who panicked, immediately tried to escape from Abigail's pursuit. In the chase, Peter accidentally fell down the stairs because Frank happened to open the door through which Peter passed. Abigail switched to chasing Frank, and she managed to catch him. A moment later, from behind, Joey immediately tried to inject the anesthetic into Abigail, but his attempt failed, which made the anesthetic thrown behind the locked door. Not only that, Sammy's hand was also bitten by Abigail when she was trying to help Frank. Lucky. After that, Peter managed to catch him, and Joey managed to take the injection, until finally they managed to make Abigail faint. After they locked Abigail up, Joey said he would release her if Abigail told him how they could leave this house, but Abigail refused to tell them. Then Abigail plays with their psychology by revealing their backgrounds. Starting from Sammy, whose real name is Jesse, Abigail reveals that Sammy started her crime by stealing all the money belonging to her own parents. Then Terrence is the real name of Peter. He once killed his own partner just for money. Then Adam, the real name of Frank. It turns out that he is a detective who once infiltrated the Lazar organization until he finally managed to arrest 3 elite officials in the organization, but his efforts were in vain because the day before the trial, Abigail killed the person who was painstakingly arrested by Frank. The last is Ana Lucia, the real name of Joey. She is a former medical officer in the army who was fired due to procedural errors that caused the death of the person she was treating. Feeling unacceptable to Abigail's words, Joey then replied by saying, if Abigail's position was now confined, which made her unable to do anything. But Abigail responded casually. She said that she deliberately got herself caught. And it turned out that Lambert was the person who had hired them to kidnap Abigail. He was Lazar's men. Abigail devised a plan to get herself kidnapped because basically she just wanted to play with the prey she was going to eat. That's why in the pool there were so many piles of bodies, and those people were victims who had been framed by Abigail, just like Frank's group. Abigail again played with their psychology by saying she would release 2 people who wanted to release her from the cage. Peter, who had been instigated, intended to open the cage, but Joey threatened to shoot Peter if he dared to open Abigail's cage. Stupid Peter still wanted to open Abigail's cage, which forced Joey to shoot him. But again, Abigail only played them because it turned out that she easily destroyed the iron door. Fortunately, Joey managed to save Frank by destroying the wall, which made the sunlight hit Abigail's arm, after which they went to take cover behind the sunlight that radiated in the library. Not long after, Sammy thought of an idea to damage the power source in the house so that the security system that locked them in the house would automatically shut down. Then they split into 2 groups to find the center of the power source in the house. Sammy with Peter and Joey with Frank. While they were looking for a power source, Sammy, who was previously bitten by Abigail, turned out to have turned into a vampire. It allowed Abigail to control Sammy to kill Peter. Then he pretended that Abigail had killed Peter, but this time Joey was not fooled. He invited Frank to rush away from there. Until finally they returned to the library room. Joey took an aluminum tray to reflect the sunlight, which succeeded in making Sammy destroyed by fire. Not long after, suddenly a secret door in the library room opened. Because there was no other choice, the 2 of them were forced to enter the secret door. When walking through the room, they were surprised because it turned out that their Lambert, who was also a vampire, was waiting for them. Lambert offered Frank to turn into a vampire and join their organization. Unexpectedly, Frank agreed to the offer, but without Lambert knowing, Frank already had his own plans. When he had turned into a vampire, Frank immediately killed Lambert. Not long after that, Abigail managed to find their whereabouts. But Abigail didn't know that Frank had turned into a vampire. When Abigail was caught off guard, Frank managed to suck her blood. Joey took advantage of the opportunity to disable all security systems and rushed away from there. Not long after, Frank managed to catch him. But Frank did not intend to kill Joey immediately. Unexpectedly, Abigail, who was not dead, she helped Joey. Abigail made an offer to help her kill Frank because previously Frank managed to suck some of her blood. It made her weak.
Well, well, well.
Even though they both worked together, Frank was still much stronger than them and again managed to get them both cornered. Frank tried to control Joey to kill Abigail, but without realizing it, Joey only pretended to be controlled. Finally, they managed to kill Frank. When Joey felt everything was finished, suddenly Abigail's father or Lazar came to the house. Without further ado, Lazar intended to kill Joey, but Abigail prevented him. He begged his father to let Joey go. Because Abigail asked, of course Lazar obeyed. Then Lazar told Joey to get out of there before he changed his mind, and the movie was over. Thanks for watching, and see you later.